What if I told you that you could retire right now at age 62 with less than $500,000 saved for retirement? Everyone says you need a million or two to retire. That number is a myth. What you actually need depends entirely on the life that you want to live. Take Dave, for example. He has $489,000 saved for retirement, and he's almost 62 years old. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how he retires next year and buys a little travel trailer he's been dreaming about for a decade, and drives off to the national parks with a metal detector to hunt for treasure. When Dave sat down across from me, he asked me the question I hear more than any other: can I retire? This is a guy who spent 40 years doing hard physical work, the kind of job that's tough on your body, long shifts, odd hours, the type of job that you feel in your knees, right, and your back by the time you're 60. He earned every dollar of that 489,000. And being careful with it had become such a deep habit that the idea of finally spending a little of it on himself actually scared him. But when we ran his numbers, the answer wasn't just yes, you can retire. The answer was, Dave, you could have left months ago and you've got more room than you think. Now, before we go further, who is Dave? Dave is a real client of ours. That's obviously not his real name. I've changed a couple small details to protect his privacy, but every single number you're about to see, his savings, his social security, his spending, all of it is exactly real. This is an actual plan for an actual person. Dave is single and doesn't have any kids. He wants to retire at 62, which for him is about 6 months away. Here's what he saved for retirement down to the penny: $9,000 in savings, $11,000 in a CD, 19,000 in a regular brokerage account, 246,000 in a traditional 401k, and 204,000 in a Roth 401k. When you add it all up, you get $489,000. And his social security, if he turns it on at 62, is $2,225 per month. Now, if you've watched other retirement videos, you might be doing some quick math in your head and getting a little nervous for Dave. Less than a $500,000 retiring at 62. Well, that's early, and the rule of thumb says it isn't enough. The first thing I do with anybody before I touch a calculator is figure out what they actually spend. When I asked Dave what he needs every month, he said $4,000. So that's where we start: $4,000 per month net after taxes. But then we went through it line by line. And what we found is that Dave, living his real life, spends about $3,300 per month. His actual life costs him less than the number he had in his head. That gap matters significantly, and I'll explain why here momentarily. But first, let's talk about the money that's about to start showing up in Dave's mailbox for the rest of his life. The common advice is to wait as long as you can to claim Social Security, ideally all the way till age 70. And for a lot of people, that's genuinely smart. For Dave, we did the exact opposite. We recommended he file at age 62. Dave's got $489,000 portfolio, and he's retiring early, which means that money has to last a long time. One of the most dangerous things to a portfolio that size is pulling too much out of it in the early years, especially if the market has a rough patch right when he retires. So think about what Social Security really is doing here. Dave paid into the system his whole career. And the way it works is today's workers fund today's retirees. So now that he's collecting, he's really living on other people's money instead of his own. It's guaranteed, it's backed by the federal government, and it shows up every month whether the market's up or down. So we spend that first, which means he puts less pressure on his own portfolio. Yes, waiting would have grown his check, but waiting would have meant draining his own accounts faster. And he's single. So filing early isn't negatively impacting survivor benefits. For Dave, turning it on at 62 isn't leaving money on the table. It's protecting that 489,000. So that's $2,225 per month. Dave lives on 3,300, which leaves a gap of just over $1,000 per month that has to come from his own money. Whenever we build a retirement income plan, we build it like a house. We call it our financial house strategy. Foundation first, then the walls, then the roof, and every layer has one job. We do this because everybody wants the same three things from their money. They want it to be safe, they want to be able to get to it, and they want it to grow. And no single investment does all three at once. So we stop trying to force one thing to do everything. We build it in layers instead. The foundation is cash. Its only job is to make sure Dave never has to sell an investment at a bad time just to cover an unexpected expense. A new transmission in the truck, a medical bill, you name it. Dave already had that covered, about 20,000 between his savings and his CD, which is right around 6 months of his real spending. The walls are the income floor. This is the money's whose entire job is to pay Dave's bills no matter what the stock market is doing. For Dave, we took $200,000 out of his traditional 401k and moved it into a protected vehicle, something that cannot lose its value when the market drops, that keeps pace with inflation, and that Dave can access. The whole idea of the walls is simple. We protect the income and we grow the rest. As long as it has those three characteristics, principal protection, reasonable growth, and partial liquidity, it does not matter what you invest inside the walls, but it has to have all three of those characteristics. And here's why the walls matter so much for a guy like Dave. One major risk in early retirement is called the sequence of returns. Say Dave retires and the market drops 20% in the first couple of years. If he's pulling income straight from a portfolio that's also falling, he's selling investments while they're down just to eat. And every share he sells at the bottom is a share that isn't there to recover when the market comes back. A younger person still working rides that out without any issues. But for a retiree living on the money, it can cause permanent damage. The walls take that risk off the table because Dave's income floor doesn't move when the market moves. A bad first few years can't touch his lifestyle. He never has to sell low to buy groceries. That's what that $200,000 is really buying him. Not a better return, but protection from the thing that can jeopardize his ability to stay retired. And the roof is growth. That's everything left over, about $269,000, including his entire Roth, out in the market where it belongs. We take calculated risk with the roof because Dave could easily live another 30 years and inflation will continue. But here's why this strategy works because the foundation covers emergencies and the walls cover the bills. The roof can be left completely alone. If the market drops the year Dave retires, it doesn't touch his income at all. It just sits up there and recovers. So that's his financial house. Safe money down at the bottom for emergencies, an income floor in the middle to pay his bills, and his growth up top where a bad year can't hurt him. Every dollar has marching orders. Now, the order that you spend your accounts can be worth tens of thousands of dollars in taxes over retirement. So for Dave, we do it in a deliberate order. Tax deferred first, then taxable, then tax free. We had Dave spend his traditional 401k money first, the stuff that's never been taxed, for two specific reasons. First, that account is the one that the government eventually forces you to drain with something called required minimum distributions. By spending it down early, we shrink those forced withdrawals, which keeps his taxable income low for the rest of his life. And second, it means Dave's Roth, that $204,000, gets left completely alone to grow tax-free for years. Every dollar it grows is a dollar Dave never has to pay taxes on, which means later in retirement, once that traditional money is drawn down, Dave's living on just his Social Security and his Roth. His Social Security at his income level isn't taxed at all, and his Roth is already tax-free, which means Dave spends the back half of his retirement sitting in the 0% tax bracket because we spent his money in the right order. Okay, we built his financial house and we set up his spending order. But how much can he safely pull out every month, and how does he know if he's not overdoing it? For that, we use a strategy called Guardrails. And here's why I love this withdrawal strategy. Most people we work with aren't trying to live large and blow through their savings. They just want to spend smart and give themselves permission to treat themselves every once in a while without constantly worrying if it's going to come back and haunt them. That's exactly what Guardrails do. They give you structure without boxing you in. And most importantly, they warn you when you're getting too close to the edge before you're actually in trouble. So here's how they work. Dave starts with a withdrawal rate of 5.4%. That's the rate that research says is safe using this strategy. And notice that's well above the old 4% rule most retirees cling to. So right off the bat, Dave gave himself a raise. Then each year we check in and it works in the direction you'd hope. If the market's been good and Dave's accounts have grown, he can pull the same income from a bigger pile. So his withdrawal rate actually drops. That's the green light. Dave gets to give himself a raise. Picture his portfolio climbing to $610,000. Now he can spend around $2,400 per month instead of 22. But if the market's been rough and his accounts have shrunk, that same withdrawal is now higher. So we have to trim his spending back a little, just temporarily, until he's back on track. So say his portfolio dips to 410,000. We'd lower his withdrawal down to about 2,000 per month just for a while, not forever, just until things recover. So I like to use a unrelated study that helps me really explain how guardrails work. So researchers once studied kids on a playground with no fence around it, and what they found is the kids huddled in the middle. They wouldn't wander, they wouldn't explore because they didn't know how far was too far. Then they put a fence around the playground, and the kids used every square inch of it. They ran right up to the edges and played because they knew exactly how far they could go before they were in danger. That's what guardrails do for Dave. Without the guardrails, most people simply won't spend their money because they're afraid of running out of it. The fence isn't a cage, it's the thing that lets him actually run around. Once he knows where the edge is, he can quit hovering in the middle of his own retirement and go spend the money he worked 40 years to save. So, what does 5.4% actually mean for Dave? Add his $2,200 per month from his portfolio to his $2,225 per month for Social Security, and Dave's got about $4,400 per month coming in. Remember, Dave lives on $3,300. He's bringing in $4,400. Dave doesn't have a shortage. Dave has more than $1,000 per month to spare. Now, there are two big questions left, and they're important ones. First question, what about health insurance? Dave's 62. Medicare doesn't start until 65. So how does he cover those 3 years in between? Here's Dave's situation. He's healthy. He doesn't take medications, and he's buying his own plan on the marketplace. Depending on what state you live in, a plan for a healthy 62-year-old runs anywhere between a few hundred to maybe $800 per month. And remember that gap? Dave said he needed $4,000 per month, but he really only spends $3,300. That $700 difference was Dave, without even fully realizing it, leaving room for his health insurance. His $4,000 number was never padding. It was his real life plus health care. And the plan covers it with a little bit left over. Then at 65, Medicare kicks in and the premium drops down and the breathing room gets even bigger. The second question is, should Dave be doing Roth conversions? For him, the answer is no. And knowing when not to do something is just important as knowing when you should be doing it. Dave doesn't need conversions because we're already draining his traditional account through his everyday spending, which does the same job. And he's not going to get hit with the Medicare high income surcharge people call IRMA because his income doesn't come anywhere close to those thresholds. And he doesn't have any legacy needs. So forcing conversions on Dave would just create a tax bill today for a problem he's never going to have. So we don't do it. His plan is already about as tax efficient as a plan can get. So let's go back to my first conversation with Dave, where he asked if he could retire. Dave absolutely can retire at 62. He can turn on his Social Security. He can cover his own health insurance until Medicare with money to spare. And he'll pay almost nothing in taxes for the majority of his retirement. His income floor is protected from any market crash. His growth is left alone to carry him through 30 years of inflation. And he's got more than $1,000 per month that he actually needs to spend. So yes, Dave, buy the trailer, buy a good metal detector, the nice one, not the cheap one. Dave isn't going to be hiking the trails at Yellowstone when he's in his 80s. The whole reason we front loaded his plan, the reason we built room for him to spend more in these early years is that these are the years he can actually use it. While he's healthy, we want him digging up as much treasure as he can and living the go-go years at full speed. Because a real plan was never about Dave becoming the richest person in the neighborhood. It was about him knowing for certain that the money's going to be there so he can quit worrying and go enjoy the retirement that he earned. So if you're anything like Dave and you've been careful your whole life and you just want someone to run your real numbers and tell you straight whether you're free to retire, that's exactly what we do. And there's a link right down in the description whenever you're ready to schedule your complimentary phone call with us to get your retirement questions answered. And remember, the difference between worrying about retirement and actually enjoying it usually isn't more money. It's about having a plan built around the life you actually want. As always, thanks for spending part of your day with me, and I'll see you in the next video.